Welcome to Rise Untold, where the stories behind the spotlight come alive. She was America's sweetheart, the woman who could light up the screen with just a smile. The golden girl of the 90s, whose laugh, whose charm, whose innocence made millions believe in love again. Meg Ryan wasn't just an actress, she was the heartbeat of romantic comedies. When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle. You've Got Mail. These weren't just films. They were cultural milestones. They defined an era. And at the center of it all was Meg, relatable, funny, vulnerable, unforgettable. But Meg's story didn't begin with Hollywood lights. She grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut. Her parents divorced when she was just a teenager. That wound of a family breaking apart shaped her in ways few ever knew. She learned early how to wear a smile, even when life felt uncertain. She once said acting gave her a way to escape, to live in other people's stories when her own felt too heavy. She studied journalism at NYU. Acting wasn't the plan. But small TV commercials, bit roles, and soap operas opened a new door. And soon, Hollywood came calling. By the late 1980s, she was a rising star. In Top Gun, she played Goose's wife, a small but memorable role. Then came the audition that changed everything, Nora Ephron's When Harry Met Sally. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Suddenly, Meg Ryan was the face of modern romance. Women wanted to be her. Men fell in love with her. And Hollywood crowned her queen. But Hollywood crowns are heavy. By the 1990s, Meg Ryan was at the peak of her fame. Sleepless in Seattle with Tom Hanks made her box office gold. You've Got Mail cemented their chemistry as timeless. She wasn't just acting in love stories, she was selling a fantasy to millions. But in reality, life wasn't a fairy tale. She was married to actor Dennis Quaid. To the outside world, they looked perfect. Hollywood's golden couple. Behind closed doors, there were cracks. Dennis later admitted to years of drug addiction during their marriage. Rumors of infidelity haunted them both. Still, the world only saw the smiles. Then, in the early 2000s, it all came crashing down. On the set of Proof of Life, Meg began a relationship with co-star Russell Crowe. The press exploded. She was branded a cheater, a homewrecker. Headlines screamed betrayal. But few knew the truth. Her marriage to Dennis had already been falling apart for years. Still, the world didn't care. The narrative was written. The perfect sweetheart had turned into Hollywood's fallen angel. It was brutal. Casting directors stopped calling. Her image, once so carefully built, was destroyed overnight. Hollywood doesn't forgive easily, especially not women. For men, a scandal can be a career boost. For women, it's a career death sentence. Meg tried to reinvent herself. She chose darker, edgier roles. Like In the Cut, a thriller that shocked audiences with its raw sexuality and grit. But instead of applause for her courage, she was mocked. Critics called it desperate. Fans didn't understand. The box office bombed. And just like that, Meg Ryan's reign was over. And then came the whispers. The cruelest of them all, plastic surgery. Paparazzi photos dissected every line, every curve of her face. Articles speculated what she had done. Her appearance became late-night joke material. She was no longer celebrated for her talent, but ridiculed for her aging. For a woman who had given the world her smile. That smile now became her curse. Imagine living that way. Imagine being told that your worth is in your youth, your beauty, your innocence. And when life naturally changes you, the same world that once adored you turns cold. That is the tragedy of Meg Ryan. So she stepped away. She disappeared. For almost a decade, Meg Ryan chose silence over spotlight. She focused on her children, her son Jack with Dennis Quaid, and her adopted daughter Daisy. Away from the cameras, she tried to find what fame had stolen: peace, privacy, and herself. But the world never forgot. Fans kept asking, "Where is Meg Ryan? What happened to her?" Because the truth is, she had touched something deeper than celebrity. She had touched people's hearts. Her movies weren't just stories, they were comfort. They were hope. They were the promise that love could be real. In 2015, she returned, not as the actress we once knew, but as a director. Her film, Ithaca, was a quiet, small project. It didn't break records. It didn't win awards. But it was hers. It was her way of taking back control of her narrative, not as a star, but as an artist. Still, Hollywood's silence is deafening. At 63, Meg Ryan lives far from the spotlight that once defined her. She makes rare appearances. She walks red carpets once in a while. But the glory days are gone. And that's what makes her story so haunting, because Meg Ryan's tragedy isn't about failure. It's about the way Hollywood discards the very people it builds. It's about how women are celebrated for their youth and punished for their humanity. It's about a system that wanted her to be perfect forever, and when she couldn't, it cast her aside. And yet, perhaps the greatest tragedy is that we, the audience, let it happen. We loved her when she was the dream girl. We abandoned her when she became real, but maybe there's another way to see it. Maybe Meg Ryan's journey is not just tragic, but powerful. She lived the rise, the fall, the ridicule, and she's still here, still a mother, still an artist, still standing, because legends don't disappear. They evolve. And Meg Ryan, no matter what the tabloids say, will always be the woman who gave us magic on screen. She will always be the one who made us laugh, made us cry, made us believe. At 63, the tragedy of Meg Ryan is beyond heartbreaking. Not because she failed, not because she vanished, but because the world that once celebrated her chose to forget her the moment she no longer fit its perfect picture. Her story is not just about a fading star. It's about what happens when the very system that crowns you queen decides you no longer belong on the throne. She gave audiences some of the most beautiful love stories ever told. She gave us laughter, vulnerability, and hope. But Hollywood rarely gives back the same love it receives. For Meg, the fall wasn't just about losing roles or missing out on blockbusters. It was about losing the illusion of safety, about realizing that in this industry, you are adored until you age. You are praised until you stumble. And you are celebrated only until someone younger comes along. And yet, her story holds something powerful. Because even when the machine turned against her, even when headlines mocked her and cameras zoomed in to ridicule rather than admire, Meg Ryan didn't let bitterness define her. She stepped back. She chose silence over spectacle, family over fame, and self-discovery over public approval. In doing so, she reminded the world that behind the image, behind the gossip, there is still a human being with the right to live on her own terms. That is where the real truth of Meg Ryan lies. The tragedy may be what happened to her career, but the triumph is what she reclaimed for herself. She showed that there is life beyond the spotlight, that there is dignity in walking away, and that a person's worth is never just in their youth, beauty, or fame. It is in their resilience. At 63, Meg Ryan's journey is not just heartbreaking, it is instructive. Because if she could rise to the top of Hollywood, fall in front of the world, break under the weight of criticism, and still gather the strength to find herself again, then maybe you can too. If she could endure the cruelty of fame and still discover peace in her own way, then maybe you can too. And if she could survive the rise and the fall, the ridicule and the silence, and still stand with quiet grace, maybe, just maybe, you can too.